Okay, where's the camera? Over there? All
Right
right.
here. Yeah, there it is.
Okay, I should change this view a little bit differently, but I'll work with it. Well, good afternoon again. So, what I want you to do is, and I don't know if I'll get to everybody, but in the chat, write down probably a favorite musical instrument that you like. You could put more than one. And if many of you do that, keep in mind, I'm sure there's going to be some duplicates. That's fine. And then, and keep in mind, I'll get to some of those, as many as I can. But I'm going to start off with a little instruction and then revert to what you put in the chat. So you have a little time. Just put in, I'm sure someone's going to put piano. But if you have an instrument, on your Lowry or Esty that you really like using a lot, go ahead and put that in there. And at some point, I'll probably already have referred to it, or I will refer to it if it's not in my agenda today. But I'll start off with a little music for you here. And I think what I'll do is I'll put this on here, put that on there, speed it up to this, and I'm going to do this. And I'm not telling you what I'm doing because I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just pushing buttons, see what happens. Why, thank you, thank you. Now, did you notice as I was playing there, I don't know if you could see it. Let's see over here. Yeah, I kept reaching up and touching stuff, right? Let me just change my view so I could see your beautiful faces. So, as you noticed, as I was playing, and I'm sure you've seen us either live in the store or even online, if depending on our angle shot, our camera shot, you've probably seen us as we're playing. We'll reach up and touch things and touch stuff, and then you hear the sound change, and then most of the time, that sound is works. Those combinations work, and I know I work with Jerome here every day, so whenever he plays, he's one of those that likes to just set up a basic sound, and as he's playing, he likes to adjust and change his own sounds, and most of the time he's got these great combinations because he's used to doing that. Well, the answer to that for students or hobby players has always been presets, obviously, because we always say the more presets you have, the more it does for you. There are more recipes at your fingertips, which still holds true. But I'm going to tell you a couple things. Presets is also a great way to give you ideas of combinations. Okay. And number one. And number two, what I like to do today is kind of give you some ideas, I'm going to say it basic concepts of if you want to turn on the organ and try some of your own, because I can tell you in all the years of doing this, anytime I ask a student, do you experiment with sounds? And every time the answer is yes, I follow it up with how often you get a sound that you like. And then I usually get a funny reaction. Oh, oh, that's another story. And it seems like usually it's every now and then we get a sound. I find a sound that I like and then I save it. So what I'm going to do is kind of give you just some basic starting points of coming up with some good combinations of sounds. And then I'm going to also give you some tips on kind of like if all else fails, try this or do this. So when I was playing that, just see if anybody can guess or put your hand up. Anybody guess what sounds I was using in that besides Joni and Sean? Any guesses? Even if it's a bad guess, it's a good guess because that means you're participating. Okay, we have Jan and Mary Townsend has got their hand up. So Jan Dipple.
Saxophone?
I think I heard sax and some vibes maybe.
Okay, and then Mary, did you say saxophone as well? Was that you?
No, it was
Someone said, all right. Oh, wait, the hand down there.
Helen.
Okay, my chat is blocking your face. Give me a second here.
Helen.
Oh, I can't see your. Oh, Helen. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so on my computer, the chat shows up right in the screen and it blocks the screen that's there. Okay, so I did use some vibes. I used some saxophones. What else did you say? Somebody? There was a guitar. There was some piano. There was electric piano, so forth. So what I'm going to do is give you kind of a starting point of just some typical combinations that work out nicely. First of all, and keep in mind that these ideas are inspired by some of the presets I've used on the Lowry instruments. Okay, so because there are some recipes there, but if you do your own, they're going to be slightly different. So one of the combinations I used here was, let me put on that big band or that Frank and the Count what I had on here. Let's see. All right. So what I did is, first of all, if you're going to experiment, sometimes the first way to experiment and create your own is, this almost sounds contradictory to what we typically tell students. Everybody has either a button called Rhythm Preset, Style Setup, Auto Setup, or Automatic Setup, or one of those options. And that button sets up the organ. So if I put on a big band, it sets it up to play and it gives you a nice setup for that, okay? What I'm going to tell you to do is the opposite. Turn on the organ, turn off that button. So if you have the ST, it's called Auto Setup. You have the EZ or the EY series, it's called Style Setup. And if you have the A and the SU, the E's, you have Rhythm Presets. So you'll notice I don't have it on, okay? And the reason for that is just for experimentation purposes. If you accidentally push something, you won't lose your setup as easily, okay? But right now what I did is I put on, well, I'll start off with what I had. And what I had was this, and I think this, something like this. That was a jazz guitar. Now, the cool thing about guitars is, I'm going to stay on jazz guitar for a minute, is depending on how many guitars you have in an instrument, it almost works most of the time. It works well when you combine two guitar sounds. A good starting point is jazz guitar. Now, some organs have jazz guitar 1, some have jazz guitar 2, and then if you're in that family of instruments, there might be a Hawaiian guitar, believe it or not. And what's cool about that is you can take and combine the two together. Now, here's just the jazz guitar on the instrument. Now, by the way, if there's anybody here that has the Easy or the Esty, I'm going to be referring to those models. I have it actually set up here, so I'm going to hop over there in a minute. But here's just your jazz guitar that's on the dashboard, your typical jazz guitar sound. Okay, now what I did is I combined that with jazz guitar 2, and here's what you get. Now the cool thing is jazz guitar is one of those instruments that if you pick, I'm going to say the right sound. Of course, everybody's ears is your own measurement to what you think is right, what sounds good to you. But here's some other great combinations that work well with jazz guitar. So jazz guitar, another jazz guitar. Sometimes you have jazz guitar 2, depending on your model you own. And while I have it up, I mentioned Hawaiian guitar. Now let me put on the Hawaiian guitar for a second here. All right, here's your, and then there's a Hawaiian guitar 2. All right, so some of you have one Hawaiian guitar, some of you have 2. All right, now I put on, in this case, a Hawaiian guitar, which normally people would think, oh, Hawaiian music. All right, now watch what happens when I put that in combination with the jazz guitar, and let's see what we got. Works very nicely. Well, I think so. But you can get relatively creative with some of the sounds. Now, you can also, and get a nice sound, you can also get relatively creative and go, whoa, that doesn't sound good. If this is a preference, you may think differently, but jazz guitar and banjo. I have to stop right there. I don't like it. To me, a banjo is kind of one of those instruments, as a personal preference, it's kind of on its own, but and it wouldn't work well with the swing. Now, check this out. I'm going to push jazz guitar and vibes, another great combination. Whoops, used to glide there. So jazz guitar and vibes. Now, when I'm playing the jazz guitar and the vibes, notice how I play the notes. And you'll notice I release the note a lot. And the reason is the vibraphone kind of has a built-in sustain. So the notes hang out. Okay, it kind of carries out. Whereas jazz guitar stops immediately. So a lot of times when I use the guitar sounds, I may hold the note. Whereas if I put on a vibraphone in this case, or the vibes, all right, so let's see how good we've been paying attention. So one combination was just a jazz guitar and a jazz guitar. Another one was jazz guitar 2, a jazz guitar with one of the Hawaiian guitars. Now, I chose the Hawaiian Guitar 2, by the way, if you have it, because there's no sustain on that. All right. Another one was Jazz Guitar in Vibes. All right. Now, let's go over to some of the piano sounds. Piano, electric pianos. You're going to find that a lot of these instruments, this grouping of sounds I'm going to give you, they're almost interchangeable. And you can come up with nice little combinations of sounds at an instant that sound relatively nice. Now, one other little factor, and I know a lot of students avoid this feature because it could be relatively difficult depending on your fingering. I like the dynamic keying or the touch feature. In other words, the feature that allows you when you hit the note, to hit the note, strike a little harder to give you your dynamics, if you will. Okay? So, and the reason why I do that, particularly on pianos and guitars and electric pianos, because those sounds, if you really play those notes on the keyboard, depending on the instrument you have, you'll hear certain characteristics about that instrument by using the dynamic keying. So if I have jazz guitar, let me put on the Hawaiian Guitar 2 and the jazz guitar combination. Depending on hard or soft I hit it, sometimes it gives you just enough, and it has a little bit of a, it just resonates differently, I guess would be the best way to explain that. And here's the cool thing. If you do it in reverse, sometimes the effect is a little bit different. So in that case, I could hear the jazz guitar a little more than the Hawaiian guitar. Now let's branch off a little bit. Another great combination of sounds that are interchangeable are pianos and electric pianos, like I mentioned. So let me take it a step further. Let me go to jazz guitar, like I started with, and then maybe add the electric piano to it and see what happens. All right. Now, for those of you who can combine two sounds, depending on your instrument, you know, like here, you'll see the one's flashing, one's not. I'm going to push the solid one and then go to the other one. Now, the electric piano is blinking, but listen to the volume combination. It's going to sound just a little bit different. In that case, you can hear the electric piano a little more. Now, let me go from the electric piano. What I like about the jazz guitar is even though it's a string instrument, it almost has kind of a percussive type of effect, the way that they made the jazz guitar sound. So that's why I think some of those work nicely with the electric pianos. Now I'm going to keep it on electric piano. Here we go. That's just a real pretty sound. I tried jazz guitar with electric piano. Now, if I just kind of go a different route here, how about electric piano and a piano? They're both pianos, right? Do you think that might sound okay? Shake your head yes or no if you think. We got some maybes. Well, let's see. I think it might be, but again, it's what it sounds good to you. Now that's just the electric piano. Let me put it with the piano. I kind of like it. You could have a little fun here, and maybe I tried electric piano with jazz guitar, and I thought it sounded good. Maybe about the piano and the jazz guitar now. Now, I know what you're wondering. There might be somebody there that has a relatively smaller model. Not everybody has the great big models. Oh my goodness, what about this little guy here, or this semi little guy here? Can we do some of these fancy combinations, you ask? I don't see you asking, but you have that look on your face like, yes, I'm asking, so I'm going to answer. Here's just a simple little Discovery 3. Now the beauty is I actually have the capability of combining two sounds together. So any of the combinations that I mentioned, if those instruments are on here, should work. Now I happen to have it on a standard, so let me just, all right. So let me start off with your piano. Let me put on a tempo that's just a piano. Piano and electric piano. Now, I got to tell you what I just did, by the way. So a lot of the instruments have the capability of putting two instruments on together. Now, on the EY series, the EX series, you have individual control volumes for your instrument. So in sound 1 and sound 2, if you put a piano guitar in one and a guitar in the other, you have an individual volume. All right. Some of the models have one volume that controls both of the instruments. Like in this case here, there's one volume here. Okay. So whatever two I have controls the overall volume. However, a little trick, and this applies also to the Prestige I was just on, or the Legend, or Floridians, Royales, any of the models that have that similar panel. Even though you have one volume control that can, like when I press the both together, even though I have one volume control that controls it, let me just swing you back over here, and then I'll swing back over here. I'm just going to play the piano by itself for a second, just a note. Okay, here's the jazz guitar by itself. Okay, so that's the volume of that. Now I'm going to put them both on, the piano and the jazz guitar. Now listen closely. Now let me do it in reverse. Okay, one sound will typically, and depending on how you have the organ set up, sometimes one sound will sound stronger than the other, depending on which combination you have first. So when I came over here to our little guy, you know, when I put on piano, electric piano, now I'm going to do it in reverse. Okay, so the one combination, the electric piano, was a lot stronger than the piano, and then when I switched it, vice versa. You may see that happen sometimes depending on how the organ is set up in the moment, okay? Now, that's a whole different class for A series, SU series, which I may do someday. Now I just came up with an idea for a class on how to go into working on those volumes. But this is about coming up with some good combinations. I mentioned, let's see, electric piano and jazz guitar. Let's see. Jazz guitar and vibes. Now, before I go any further, questions, if you have any. Now, I see all your faces. You look really serious right now. Let me see everybody smile.
It's like Helen Beam has a question.
Yes, Helen Beam, where are you on the screen? Oh, there you are.
I have a Sterling. How do I get two sounds together, combine two sounds on a Sterling?
Just orchestral 1 and orchestral 2.
Okay.
So on the right side, these are all orchestral buttons. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And these are solo buttons. So a majority of the A and SU series models are use that same concept, the red and the blue. Okay. When the Sterling was introduced, what they did is they consolidated all those sounds and put them into what they call quick picks. And then they left you with 2 buttons and 2 buttons. Okay. Well, the reason for that is you never have more than 2 buttons on at the same time in the orchestral anyway. So they just said Genius 1 and Genius 2. So you get 1 sound in the Genius and 1 sound in the Genius 2. It just basically means you have 1 instrument there, 1 or the other. Same thing here. Okay. I have 2 pressed. This just has them listed on the dash. So what I would do is you can simply just hit your Genius button and scroll to the sound you want, or on the Sterling, because of the consolidation of the buttons and giving you the screens, you have an option. I can't do it here, but if you go to your keypad, you'll have an option that's, actually I could do it here. I'm sorry. You have an option that says alphabet. It'll be on your right side. You have the Sterling. And then you can change to, you can pick the letter. So like if I want a guitar sound, I would hit G and then one of the Genius buttons, and it'll show up what guitars in the screen. And then you can scroll within the guitars. Okay. Now it's a little tricky. You just got to know the way they group them alphabetically. So like someone would say, I like a tenor sax. So sometimes they make the mistake of going to the T's, but actually it's saxophone. So I would use S and then go to the S's and search for all the saxophones, and they'll group them all together. Okay. But that's essentially it. You put the 2 together. Okay.
So you press both buttons, the upper and lower, to get the 1 sound?
It's not upper or lower. You press the 2 red buttons together, Genius 1 and Genius 2, and it'll be both of them on.
And it'll make 1 sound of the combination.
It'll give you both sounds together. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, there is this upper, lower, right thing, and I'll just say it quickly. It's a good question to ask your PA if you have a further question. But this is assuming that my upper button is on. Okay, so if the upper button is on, the sounds are where? Upper or lower keyboard?
Upper.
Okay, and I say it like that because I want it to be that simple, that direct, okay? If I turn that off and I put lower right, where does that sound go?
Your lower right.
Exactly, all right?
Yeah.
The one that tricks people is when you have upper and lower right, which one is on the top and which was on the bottom? The solid one is on top, the blinking one's on the bottom. So then in that case that I just said, it will not be combined. It'll separate, put one on the top and the bottom, okay? So for the purpose of this exercise and this instruction, for combining sounds, just remember that your upper has to be on.
Just the upper.
Just the upper. And you can do the same with the solo. You can put 2 solo sounds together. You could put them both on the top, or you could put them both on the bottom. It's the same process, okay? So what I did earlier, before I go to the next couple of ideas of sounds, I'm going to talk about some of the more like saxophones and things like that. That tends to be a little trickier than vibes, piano, vibes, guitar, electric piano. Those sounds tend to be a little bit easier to combine, okay? Because they're if you have 2 guitars, they work great. If you have 2 different pianos, it works great. If you have a guitar and a piano, it may work nicely. All right. Now, here's the caution. I do want to caution if you want to make a note. Be careful when you're combining, especially like pianos and guitars, and using harmony. Because it could sound harsh to some ears. Because like a piano, well, what is a piano? A string instrument or percussion? Oh, Joni's smiling. I could see her. The answer is yes to both, okay? Because it's a string instrument, but the argument is, but the hammer strikes, so there technically it's considered a percussion. So that's why, like pianos, if you put on a piano with an AOC, for some people, it tends to be a little harsh for the ears. So when you're experimenting, what you don't want to do is put yourself in the positions where you're constantly making this face, okay? So no harmony. Try some of the combinations that I mentioned and just interchange them both. And you'll find some that work with your ears. The beauty of this is if you ever want to kind of explore some of these ideas yourself, you don't have to rely just on the beautiful presets you have. They're great, but then you can try to break out of your box a little bit. Now, I mentioned solo instruments. So for those of you who have the solo section, you could do it on the upper or lower right, however you want. I had down here a saxophone at one point, but I had it just as a saxophone at first. And then I came back around. Let's see, this is what just the saxophone. No, that's not just the saxophone. And then I did this. That's I actually like that sound. That happens to be a saxophone and a flute combination. Okay. Saxophones get a little tricky, but some of the obvious that you can do is any grouping of saxophones, one or two, will typically work. You can have some fun with this too, because if you really get into experimenting, what we can do, here's a baritone sax, for example, which is, what is that, an octave lower, Joni? Sounds an octave lower than this one. Okay, so if you put a baritone and a regular saxophone on, then you get this. Oops, don't do the glide. I did the glide by accident anyway. Here we go. Now let me do it in reverse. So essentially what I'm doing, it would be like me doing this. Let me see if I can, well, let me put it on the upper keyboard so I can show this to you. Okay, an octave lower would be here. So imagine if you want to get that effect, two notes playing octave apart. I guess you could use an octave harmony, or you could do this. Okay, that's just too much work for me. I'm sorry. So if I put on a baritone and a regular sax, then I can get this. So you got one note playing here, and the other note sounds like it's playing an octave lower. So you get this really cool. That's how some of these presets are programmed, with these combinations. We know them as, boy, that's a great preset, but sometimes we don't know how much brain power went into that when Bill Curry was programming these.
You have
Okay.
a question from Kitty?
Kitty, you have a question?
You have to unmute yourself, Kitty. Unmute yourself, Kitty.
She looks like she's working on it.
Okay, how's that?
That's
Great.
great.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
You can see me. Good Lord, you can see me.
I can see you. Let me see you smile. Let me see you
Anyway.
smile. You got to smile when you ask a question. That's
No,
my
I don't have to smile. I'm
Okay.
tired today. I'm running around.
All right.
How do you get the double sounds on the journey?
The journey.
It's one of the easy ones.
Yes, I'm scanning to the dashboard right now. This is my concentration, looking on the organ in my head, is set up similar to the Easy 10, correct, Joni? Okay,
Oh,
so
that-
the answer to that question, and I'll do that by coming over here for those who
Well,
have.
you can tell me later, but I
No,
want
I'm telling you now, honey. You asked. You need an answer.
okay.
You
Well, I don't
deserve,
want to ruin the class.
you deserve answers. No, that's why we have questions.
Well, I
So-
don't even know how to get in there, so it doesn't matter.
So like the Easy series, the EY, not the EY series, not all of them, but the Journey, the Fanfare, the Easy series, and the SDs all work the same. That you want to get two sounds, you just push two together. So on your dashboard, on the right side where your
Yeah, I
melody
got it.
sounds are,
Yeah,
you have to now. Here's what you want to remember. this one works like how I'm going to explain it to you. Okay. So in here, when I push piano and I scroll, it gives me another piano. In this case, it just goes back and forth to two different pianos. Okay. On the journey, when you push the piano button, it's going to show up on the screen a piano sound. If you
Yeah.
scroll, you'll be able to scroll through 6, 8, I don't know the exact number, about 6 or 8 different piano type sounds. So if I was doing it on the journey as an example, what I do, if let's say I wanted to do a piano and a guitar, I'd go to the piano button, scroll to the piano I want to use. Then I would go to the guitar button and scroll to the guitar I want to use, and then I would push them both together. And in this case, if I want an electric piano and a guitar, similar way, I'm going to push piano and scroll to electric piano, and then I'm going to go to the guitar, and then I have a jazz guitar and electric guitar, so I'm going to use the jazz guitar since I mentioned that. Now I'm going to put them both together, and the same thing that I said earlier, if you push them both together, they're going to be programmed a certain way. What I did is I pushed piano. While I held it, I pushed guitar.
And then you scroll to the end.
Well, first you scroll to the sound that you want in each, but when you're ready to put them both together, you
Yeah.
hold one down and then press the other, and then they're both lit. Now listen, okay? Same functionality as the journey. Now if I go the opposite way, I'll start with the guitar and then piano. You notice the piano is a little bit stronger in that case.
Yeah.
Okay, but same basic operation. Okay. Now,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And what I would encourage you to do, because the question you just asked is a really good question, and it leads to a lot of creativity and sounds, I would definitely get with a personal assistant and some more
Oh, I do a
instruction.
lot of strange things with the organ. When I sit down at it, I play all the sounds, everything. But I have to really sit with Andrew.
Yeah, and do that, because you'll be surprised some of the ideas you get. The journey has lots of presets in it already pre-programmed, and they're great.
I
But
know.
sometimes we like to get a little creative and find some of our own sounds. Okay? Just remember, I'm going to remind everyone what I said in the very beginning. If you want to experiment, turn on the organ, turn off rhythm preset, turn off style setup, just for keeping it basic. Okay? Now, I asked you guys to put some things in the chat, and I didn't want to forget to do this, but I got a couple of what I call, here's some foolproof things you can do. Before I do that, Greg, do you have a question? Oh, I lost. Where did you go? Unmute yourself, Greg.
There we go. I forgot to unmute myself. I really am pretty good with Zoom. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. But the question is on the marquee that I've got, I didn't see any buttons over there that readily allow me to get the double sounds together. I've got an
Okay,
upper and
well,
a lower.
Now the
And I'm-
marquee. No, let me answer that. The marquee is actually a little bit easier. You don't have to push two together with two fingers. You have, in this case, there's two orchestral buttons that I pushed together. When I was on the little guys here, the orchestral, I had to push two together in order to get it. All right.
Yep.
On the Rialto Inspire Marquee, Aria, Grand Marquee, that panel, you have two orchestral buttons. You only have to push one at a time. You don't have to push them at the same time. So it has simply, it's labeled sound, okay? And right next to it, it says upper. So
Yep.
whatever sound is there in that sound button, when you push upper, that sound is going to go where?
The upper keyboard.
Exactly. Okay, and then you have an orchestral 2 section. And if there's say a jazz guitar in that sound button, the sound button doesn't turn on the sound. It just tells you what's there. And if you push upper on that one, same thing. So if you push the upper on both of those, then you have both combinations.
Oh, push upper on both of them.
Yes. So
Yeah.
change that
Yeah,
functionality. They changed that functionality because some people had a little bit of a challenge. What I was explaining earlier, if I push these two together and I have upper and lower right, which one is on the top and which one's on the bottom? Well, some people get it when I explain it, and sometimes they scratch their head a little bit, and we have to instruct a little bit more. Okay. Now, I have a little trick for you, just a little fun thing you can try out. And let me see in the chat here. Oh my gosh. We have people that says guitar, saxophone vibes, oboe, harpsichord, oboe, tubas, bagpipes. Oh yeah. They got an oh yeah next to that. All right. Sometimes when we're playing and we need a quick little, I want to combine a sound and I want to make sure it doesn't sound bad. Okay. There's two things you can do. Oh, someone's trying to call me and my camera went away. Give me a second, folks. Am I back now? Okay. I had to put it on airplane mode. Sorry about that. I use my phone for the camera so a little bit clear picture. All right. So just a little bonus, a little tip for you that if you ever want, and I'll give you a few examples, small, medium, large, okay? But this was something I learned years ago. If you ever have keep it simple for starters, a piano, we mentioned some sounds and you guys gave me some examples and I'll demo. Oh, my camera went away. What happened?
Looking for your phone.
Oh boy.
Oh
Yes.
boy, oh boy.
I know why. Give me a second. Because I went from one mode to the other, it went to sleep.
Such technology.
Looking for the phone. At least there's a little kitty to make it funny that it's happening. I wonder if that's why they did that. People would get upset because the screen went away, but then you can't get mad. There's a cute little kitty wagging its tail. So if you have a sound like some of the ones I'll use an example, but some of the ones I mentioned like piano, guitar, jazz guitar, I'll even mention vocal. If all else fails, you want a nice little good, nice sound to kind of fill it up or make it sound good. You never go wrong with organ or strings. Okay. And I'm going to give you a few examples and then I'm going to ask, so I don't have to keep turning my neck. Joni, you can see the chat there. Okay. Give me some of the ones there in a minute, but here's an example and I'll just turn off all of the gadgets here. Let me just power it up. And let me start off with a few of the ones that I've already used. Piano, jazz, guitar, okay? So here is, what I did is I turned on the organ. I'll turn off rhythm preset. And there's no sound. It comes up with the organ sound, but I turned it off so there's nothing here. All right? And I have a piano. All right? And if I want to just add something to that, by the way, if you want to make a note, a lot of the time the pianos on the Lowrys is equal to the same pitch as your 8-foot strings. Okay? Not that it's going to be, if you don't remember that, it doesn't matter. But here's a piano, and I'm going to add some strings to that and tell me what happens. Now, I'm going to put sustain to the strings, but here we go. Here's a piano. Here's with piano strings. Here's jazz guitar by itself. With strings. All right, now, if you have, by the way, if your instrument has these yellow tabs here, and I know you marquee owners with the big super size screen, your yellow tabs are in the front. If you noticed, when you power up the instrument, it defaults to that screen for a reason, because those string sounds are great combination type sounds. So let's see, what were some of the sounds that we had in there?
Calliope.
Calliope. Of course, you had to make me go search. You can, all right, let's see. She knows what sounds are on the dashboard. C. Genius. Wait. Oh, I can't find the sound on this one. So I'll have to scroll through. I forget. The Sterling, you can search for the sounds. The Genius sounds alphabetically. Let's see. Calliope. C-A. Okay, so here's a Calliope. It almost sounds like a flute to me, but that's what a Calliope kind of is, isn't it? Okay, now I'm going to add some strings to it. Now watch. Sounds like it works for me. Let me try this. Well, I don't know. I think that works fine for me. Pick another sound.
Trumpet.
Trumpet. Okay, now at the end, I'm going to ramble off some things. You may have to go back and watch this that are going to be key, okay? But here's a trumpet. Trumpet with strings. Okay, another one.
Hawaiian guitar.
With strings. Now, by the way, if in case you're wondering, this is a side note, Hawaiian guitar bends when you use the glide. If you put on strings by itself, it does not bend. I'm trying to bend the note. But if you have a sound on that bends along with a sound that doesn't bend, like the strings in this case, it'll bend the string notes for you. Because if it doesn't, then it might sound a little bit off key for a moment. So any sound you use, I'm just going to pick a bunch on the dashboard here now. Trombone. I know there's a trombone somewhere. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit differently with trombone, okay? But here's trombone. With strings. All right. Now, what I did differently was there's a 16 and 8 and a 4-foot strings. A lot of people ask, what's the difference? Basically, if you have the 3 different string flute tabs or the string tabs, all that means is that the note you play, here's a C note with a 16, here's the 8, and here's the 4. They're just an octave apart. So essentially, if you put all 3 together, it's like doing this with one finger. Pretty cool, huh? But a lot of times what I like to do is match the pitch of the strings to the pitch of the instrument. Now, and if you don't, it's going to sound okay. So here's that trombone. I've been using the 8-foot strings in all the other examples. But for the trombone, I use the 16-foot strings because they kind of match. Now, if you use the 8, it's not going to sound terrible, but you'll tell the difference in the octave. Still works nicely, but I like to sometimes match them first. So here's some instruments to keep in mind. Most of them most of them will equal the 8-foot strings pitch. Okay, piano, electric piano, clarinet, vibes. Let's see, what else did we do earlier? Calliope. Vibes is a great combination with strings. See, now you're going to want to go play Marianne. And the trombone, and there's some of the instruments that typically they're actually an octave lower, just the nature of the instrument. And I'll usually like to use a 16-foot strings. Now, organ or the flute tabs is a little bit different. It's a little bit different in that, and I'll come back to the organ in a second, but I just want to show you that if I take any sound, here's a string sound, I'll put on a rhythm with it too. Piano. Piano and strings. Jazz guitar. Jazz guitar and strings. It's kind of like foolproof. Like if you're playing along and you have an instrument on and you want to combine something, make it sound a lot fuller, you can't go wrong with just adding strings. And you'll notice that a lot of us do that when we're playing. We just don't tell you. We're reaching up doing all this stuff and we're like, wow, they're doing a lot of things. We're really not. We're just hitting the strings tab. And then all of this makes it look like we know what we're doing. Now, organ is a little bit different as a preference. There's certain sounds that I think work well with the organ. When I say organ, your flute tabs or there's a built-in organ button, okay? One combination that always works very nicely for starters is a piano. Now, remember earlier I told you the piano is equivalent to the 8-foot pitch. All right, so here's a piano. Here's the piano with the 8-foot strings. Piano and any of the strings is a great combination always, all right? So I learned a trick a long time ago. I wouldn't even call it a trick, a setup, one of many, that was pretty clever, and it was just a nice soothing sound. So you have an 8-foot flute tab. Instead of using the 8-foot, I'm going to put on a 16 and a 4-foot flute. So the piano is the 8-foot in the middle, the 16 and the 4, and then this is what you get. Just a real nice, good, classic. And have you put on a rhythm with it? And it's just a really good classic sound to use with the organ. Now, the other thing that works really nice with the organ sounds, you can't go wrong, is organ and strings and vocals, vocal and strings, vocal and organ. And you'll find that if you have the organ rhythm preset, there's a lot of those combinations. Well, let's hear it. So here's just a nice 16 and an 8-foot flute organ sound, commonly known as a mellow organ on some of the smaller models. Okay. This is a sound you hear a lot played by some of the Fletcher talent. And I'll put on the organ with the 16-foot strings. Or maybe you want to add some vocals. Some of you have that preset tab where it has just a vocal choir. Add some strings to it, like we said. And you can't go wrong. And of course, wait a second, Robert, you're playing that big old organ over there. Can you do that on a smaller model? Of course you can. Of course you can. Let me just tilt my thing here. Come on, tilt. There's too many knobs on this thing. This fancy. There we go. I don't know if I can get them both in the same shot, but here's a let's put on a mellow style. And I'm gonna have strings. Let's put strings with the organ, the sweet organ. How about jazz organ with strings? Any of the combinations? Can we see that organ over here? Let me just change. Okay, let me put on, let's see here. Oh, heartfelt, beautiful style. All right, starts off with piano. Piano and strings. How about some organ? Let's put on a nice sweet organ here. Turn off that piano. Organ and strings. And you have more than one string sound here. So if you put on string, like on the Journey, you may have a string button and have more in that grouping. So let me just go to the other one. Some of you have more than one organ. If you want to use the organ sounds for these experiments, start off with a 16-foot flute tab if you have that, if you have those, and then any other combination, 16 and 8, 16 and 4, 16, 8, 4, and 2. Good basic combinations. If you don't have those, but you have just the preset organ sounds, sweet, pretty, full, and mellow. If you're taking notes. Here I got pretty and rich. I wonder if I'm going to get rich by playing this. Let's listen. I mentioned vocal. Let me see. Let me put on a vocal by itself. Vocal and strings. Vocal, organ, and strings. Why, thank you very much. Well, I hope you learned something today. Any questions before I adjourn and play a song, and then I'll have to do all these combinations. Not all of them, but I'll do some of them. Any questions?
I don't see any.
Okay.
I want to thank you.
You're welcome.
I learned a lot today, and I never thought I was going to.
Well, thank you
I really
very much.
didn't. And I want to thank you.
You're welcome. I hope you did learn some.
Thank you
Yes,
too,
and
Robert.
Happy New Year.
Now, what I'm going to do is I'll close off with a little number for you.
Well, first of all, Happy New Year.
Oh, Happy New Year to you. And I played it yesterday, but I'm going to do a little bit differently. I'm going to use some saxes and some strings. And I'm going to do a nice little classic sound that some of you... There's that Guy Lombardo saxes and so forth. And I'll play it with, but I'm not going to do it slow. I'm going to do a little bit more up tempo. And by the way, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to type out some of these things that we did today. And I'll put it on a page, and I'm going to upload it. And I know I mentioned it yesterday, but it'll be a public one. So this one you should be able to get without subscribing if you don't want. But on the patreon.com/Fletcher Music Centers, I will, once I type it up, I'll upload it to that, and it'll also have this class on there. The class will also be on YouTube as well, so if you want to go back and just watch it, if you go to the Patreon, you'll be able to view it and then download the sheet. But I'll need till tonight because I got to work today, and then when I get home tonight, I'll type it all up and get it. And I think I'll remember everything I did today. If not, I'll have to go back. I have to go back and watch my video.
It's New Year's Eve. You can take the night off.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll do it at 5 o'clock before I leave. So when I get off at 6, I can go home and get ready for the ball to drop at 10 p.m. Eastern time, Arizona time, 12 p.m. Eastern. Yeah. So, and then I can be bed in time early so I can send all my sales staff an email first in the morning saying, hey, let's get to work. Start the new year off. We're at 0. Anyway, so thank you so much. And keep an eye out for the website. The email I sent out this week will tell you what's going on next week, but we're planning a bunch of things throughout the month. So the January calendars may not have a lot of stuff on it yet, but come Monday afternoon, Tuesday, you'll see a bunch of stuff. But I will send out an email letting you know what's happening next week. And so anyway, with that said, I think what I'll do is I'm gonna start off with a classic Lombardo saxophone sound, and I'll use the rhythm style that I use to open up the song. I use Frank in the Count, but instead of playing it at 160, because that's pretty fast, and I don't want to play very slow. Okay, I'll do it that's at about 100. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to improvise and use some of the different sound combinations that I mentioned in the class today. Okay, see if you can catch some of those. So here we go. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And yes, I may not see or speak to you till next year, folks. So happy New Year, stay safe, keep playing music, and we'll see you real soon. Mwah.
Bye, Robert. Happy New
Bye-bye.
Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It was
Yeah.
a delightful show.
Bye, Joni.
Bye, Joni.